Meeting to order. Ryan, can you give us a roll call, please?
I sure can. Gulick,
Here.
Rudham,
Here.
Hepley,
Here.
Brown,
Here.
and Norton.
Next, we need to approve the agenda. I move to approve the agenda.
Second?
So Chair would say it's moved and seconded?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 All against? Motion passes. Agenda is approved. Next is election of a chairperson. I motion that I'm the chairperson, Eric Rudham.
Second?
All in favor? The motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay. Next agenda is election of a vice chairperson. Are there any motions for a vice chairperson?
I'll motion.
For yourself?
For myself, yes.
Second. It's been moved and seconded for Julik?
Julik.
For Julik to be the vice chairperson. All in favor? Aye.
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 All opposed? Okay. Next topic on the agenda is public comment on any topic not on the agenda. Is there any public comment?
Did we receive any public comment?
These are just general of items not on the agenda, but no, we did not.
Seeing as there is no public comment, the next item on the agenda is a public hearing for the conditional use request of Colony Acres LLC doing business as Colony Pumpkin Patch on behalf of Colony 1927 for an agricultural experience conditional use on approximately 63.17 acres of property located on the east side of Front Street, northeast, approximately 130 feet south of East Tartan Drive, 2780 Front Street, northeast. Could we have a staff presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Ryan Rusnak with the Planning Department. This is kind of an encore presentation of yesterday's with some slight changes. So here's the property outlined in blue. It's the part of the farm as well as the area where the colonies operate the agricultural use experience. Right now, the property is in unincorporated Johnson County. The Colony 1927, the underlying landowner, has submitted an annexation application. That is scheduled to be in front of the City Council on the February the 8th. One of the things that they wanted to make sure is that they'd be able to operate the current business in city limits. And just by way of background, I've been working with Dean and Katie. It's over a year of trying to collaborate on writing an agricultural experience. And this probably won't surprise you, but there's not a lot of these in city limits, right? They tend to be in unincorporated counties. So, you know, I kind of took some templates that I thought were pretty reasonable. You know, some were very, very, very prescriptive. Some were very loose. Some had different levels. And just tried to pull bits and parts to create that ordinance. And then we would just bounce ideas off each other of hey, what do you think about this? And the collaboration aspect of it was certainly the city needs to try and protect the public interest, make sure it's not going to be detrimental to the public welfare and things like that. From their perspective, they obviously want to make sure they could operate, but you know, they wanted to have some flexibility if there's a change in how they want to do things out there. And so, with respect to the ordinance, I spent a great deal of time writing conditions that are associated with the use. Sometimes with other conditional uses, you might not have any conditions or you might have a couple. You know, and the way then you would look at that is then you would look at a site plan and say, well, the activity is going to be in this location, or they would articulate certain safeguards. I guess this is a long-winded way of saying we try to place enough general regulations for the agricultural use experience that it protects that public interest. And an example is like a 25-foot landscape area adjacent to a residential zone. And that means that that use is not, you know, right up against a house. Obviously, they want to be good neighbors, but it was things like that. Making sure there's not congestion backing out into public streets, they're not parking in the right of way, and those things. And loosening up on some of the restrictions, like normally in the city, you need to pave your parking lot and do things like that. That doesn't feel very rural. And so, we wrote ordinances to allow like gravel in parking areas and things like that to keep that rural theme going. This is kind of the description for conditional uses. They may be harmonious under special conditions and in special locations within a zone, but may not be allowed under the general provisions as a zone. So zoning code a lot of times has just a list of permitted uses. I have a single family lot. I can build a house by right as long as I follow some rules. In this case, it requires a special review of this body in order to allow that use. Conditional uses could be revoked. They could be, if you approve it and it's been a year, it can expire. I've rarely seen a conditional use be revoked, but if that's, someone is operating, say, I don't know if this is a conditional use, but a daycare facility, and then all of a sudden it's more than what they said it was going to be, and there's cars parked all over the place, and it becomes a nuisance to the neighborhood, then you could say, wait a minute, that's not what we approved, we're going to revoke that. And then here's a description for the determination. It talks about, the Planning Commission reviewing that. I'll touch base on that in a second. Said the board shall have the authority to impose conditions and safeguards as deemed necessary to protect and enhance the health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding area. That means if you came to an approval, staff might offer some conditions. Like I said, it's my opinion that I wrote the ordinance in such a way that the ordinance itself helps protect the public welfare. And the authorization of the conditional use shall not be made unless these two things are made. I'm sure Grant will advise you that it needs to meet these two standards if you're going to approve this conditional use. Okay, so again, I mentioned that the first part of this, the other aspect of it is there are design standards for buildings, and we want to ensure that any buildings related to the agriculture experience kind of hold to that rural design theme and kind of look like barns and outbuildings that would be on a farm. But it does allow, if there are some buildings that don't meet those design standards, to be kind of grandfathered in. And so they've requested that a couple of the buildings, these are two hoop structures that are on there, and there's some kind of those grain silos there, that those might be able to be, I think the hoop structures are actually used right now for the use. So they want the ability to retain those as part of the agricultural experience. Staff doesn't have an issue with that. I mean, it's right kind of in the middle of the property and away from everything. And so we did receive one letter of support, and that was from the property owners at 170 East Tartan. They were very supportive of the colonies and the activity that they were doing. As I mentioned, the Planning Commission considered the request yesterday, unanimously recommended approval subject to these two following conditions. And these are some of the conditions that you can impose that I mentioned before. That the property be annexed into the city of North Liberty, and the buildings identified in the staff report not meeting the design standards be permitted to be used in conjunction with the use. And so the findings that staff is recommending to you, it's staff's opinion that the approval of the agricultural experience conditional use would allow the business to operate within the city of North Liberty, and two, the agricultural use complying with the use standards in the ordinance that's already there would ensure compatibility with the area. And staff recommends the board approve the conditional use subject to the same conditions that the Planning Commission had recommended to you. So that's all I have, unless we'll get to questions in a bit, if you have any.
The applicant is on the phone today. It's time for the applicant presentation. Applicant, can you hear us?
Give her a chance to unmute, maybe.
It's unmuted.
Yep, we're here. We had to unmute. We actually don't have a presentation per se. We are just here to answer any questions. If you have any questions about this, we think Brian's done a really good job of presenting all the different background to how we've gotten to this point. So
Sounds good. Thank you.
I have a question. Do you see any concerns with the?
Can we wait?
We're
for
gonna-
Oh, I'm so
questions
sorry.
and comments?
So this is this is the keep your hands and feet inside the ride part for right now. Well, staff presentation, applicant presentation, time for public comments, and then we'll do a question, Q&A session next. Is that okay? So, sorry.
Okay, thanks.
We're currently at the point of the agenda for public comment. Is there any public comment on this? You said there was one written comment?
There was one written comment. It was in favor of the request.
Thank you. See no other public comment. It's time for questions and comments.
Yeah, thanks. This is for the applicant. I just wanted to get your thoughts on the way that the use is written now. Do you see any concerns with it?
The way the conditional use permit is written, no, I don't think we have any concerns about it. It allows for a lot of flexibility for the nature of our business, which is agritourism, and it changes all the time. And anybody who knows Colony Pumpkin Patch has known that we've changed a lot over the years, and we hope to continue to do that. So it allows us to do some things, but yet protect the neighborhoods and the community around us, as far as, not letting us just go off and do anything, which we don't want to do. We don't want to overuse and overextend our neighborhood support. I don't know how else to say that, but.
Yep, understood. Thank you. And then a question for Grant.
Yeah.
What happens if the property changes hands?
So the conditional use is going to run, that permit runs with the property. And so if the colonies were to sell to someone else or inherit, or however, if that use continues, the permit continues for so long as they abide by whatever condition. Assuming the conditional use permit is approved, they're annexed into the city and the use is established, okay? Then that would continue after it changes hands. Until it's discontinued for a year, or just more than, God forbid, 50% of it was destroyed, right? But it would just continue, or as Ryan said, technically it could be revoked if there was a violation of it. But that's very unusual, and I'm not aware of it happening. It's how unusual it is. So, but in the short answer, which is too late, sorry, is that it would run with the land.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's the only questions I have.
And I just, one of the more challenging parts of, at least listing out the uses that are appropriate with an agricultural experience, and the fun debate that we kind of had was like, well, we're kind of on the farm. And so I was like, yeah, but you could sell cars on the farm, and is that an agricultural experience? And, that's how we had to come to kind of working out and then they include festivals and crop mazes, U-pick operations, farmers markets, and these are agricultural uses. So that was one of the more challenging things. But just to say it runs with the land, I mean, we really tried to craft it in a way that these are legit agricultural uses. And then we allow some up to 12 non-agricultural events per calendar year that just don't fit in that box, and then they just come in and get written approval from it, and it moves on, but it doesn't allow that thing to happen every weekend, so to speak.
So you're saying when you created these standards, you kind of were pulling from other things that you had read about ways to kind of be creative in putting this together? Is that what you're telling us?
Yeah, and so, well, I'd love to. No, I shouldn't have said that. I should have just said I did it all from scratch, but I'd be lying.
I mean,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I kind of scoured the internet
Yeah.
and found, a lot of throwaways. Like, I don't like that. I don't like
Right.
that. Then you start finding, I found 3 that I really liked.
Uh-huh.
And then I just started pulling the things that I really liked from that.
Yeah.
And then, we'd send a draft to Dean and Katie and say, what do you think about this? And then we would just talk about kind of the ups and downs. What are the concerns here? And it was a very interesting process. And I don't know that I've ever gone through a collaborative ordinance writing with citizens like this. It's usually internal staff. But just of how to write it in such a way that gives them what they want, but also protects the city, what the city was looking for.
Just wanted to address the board quickly. I know that Ryan put up a couple of the criteria here, but while you're asking questions during this question and answer and comment period, I wanted to draw your attention to the two requirements that we can't, you can't issue a permit unless there's evidence that's been presented to establish two things. One, that the use is not, under these specific circumstances, it will not be detrimental to the health, safety, or general welfare of the surrounding area, and that the proposed use is necessary or desirable and provides a service or facility that contributes to the general well-being of the surrounding area. That was number one. It's a list. And you've heard staff presentation, there's a packet, and so on, and so that maybe that information has already been presented to you. Great. If you have questions about whether that's the case or not, this would be a good time to ask them about, from the applicant and staff to determine whether you believe that evidence to support those findings has been presented. The other requirement is that the use will comply with the regulations and conditions that Ryan was just talking about. So I would recommend that the board try to focus some of its questions, if it has any, on those items, just to check those two boxes.
I'll just say, Grant, you're the attorney. In your opinion, in your professional opinion, do you feel those have been met, or can you not answer that question?
That's, I can tell you what the code says, right? The code says it would be improper for me to give an argument one way or the other. So the code says that it's not detrimental, that it provides some sort of benefit and contributes to the general well-being, and it complies with the code. I can say that I'm not aware of any code violation that's proposed here. As far as the and if you have specific questions about the code, I will punt them over to Ryan in this particular instance. I can't, none have been presented to me.
And that becomes more my role, right? I say it's staff's opinion that they do meet these conditions.
And that might check the box for you.
Yeah.
Right. And then with respect to the whether it contributes to the general well-being, what are the things that you think would satisfy those? Is it economic? Is it aesthetic? Is it, you get to decide what checks those boxes as a body. But I would recommend it during your discussion period, which is coming up next. Say what you like, what you didn't like, and that sort of thing. This is all part of creating our record.
Yep.
Is that responsive to your question? I know that it's.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
I have to hear what I say too. I get it. I know that this conversation is happening to all of us right now. So I appreciate it.
Ryan, have there been complaints in the past about Colony and the activities happening there?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, they've been good neighbors and understand that they have neighbors within, very close proximity to them. From the city's perspective, as we look, obviously we look at from the city that the Colony Pumpkin Patch is a North Liberty asset, but they're technically not in the city of North Liberty. Probably most people don't. We think this is a North Liberty asset that should continue, and so we want to welcome them into the city of North Liberty. From an annexation standpoint, we can't leave holes in our municipal boundary. It's got to connect out to county land, and so it makes sense from a city perspective that we start to annex, and we need to include this piece as we annex further land to the east and southeast.
So I think looking at that, we haven't heard complaints. Like you said, I would guess that 99 out of 100 people would assume that this is North Liberty and would call you to complain about the activities.
That's right.
I think that shows that this is not detrimental to the health and well-being and the environment and health and safety of the area. Hearing that it's desirable to the city of North Liberty as an activity. I know there's a lot of young families in North Liberty driving by it in the fall. I personally have participated in some of the activities that happen out there. I think it is desirable to have activities homegrown in your own neighborhood, in your own city. And having strong supportive owners that live in that city is also desirable, which I believe we have in all of these cases. So I think that supports that this is not detrimental and that it is desirable to the city of North Liberty. And Ryan, from right now, to the best of your knowledge, it complies with all the regulations and codes.
Yes, yes, it does, or it would upon annexation, yes.
So I think the second thing that it will be able to comply with regulations and codes, and there's a history of what they've been doing will comply with the code if they're annexed into North Liberty.
Yeah, and we had a meeting with the colonies earlier this week to talk about some things they wanted to do and understanding that they're moving forward with coming into the city. And the spirit of the meeting was, we want to make sure that we're complying with your regulations, if we do this. And so we don't have a concern from the city with respect to that.
Ryan, one more question for you. I noticed there's a lot of other buildings on this property that weren't specifically circled as part of this. Are they conforming, legal conforming buildings then?
Yeah, so here's the interesting part, right? They still have an agricultural use on the property, and you can have buildings associated with the agricultural use, which those other ones are.
Okay.
And then, it's different. You have a couple of different uses going on this property, and then you have an agricultural experience. And so buildings have to comply with the design standards if they are, like, you could put a hoop building for the agricultural use, but if it's for the agricultural experience, it's got to be a little different. So you
Okay.
kind of have these different uses going on one property, and you've got several, right? You've got a house there, you've got
Yep.
agricultural use, farming, agricultural experience. So,
I
good
just want to
question.
make sure all the buildings were covered in
Yep, no.
one fell swoop.
Yep, good question.
So, it's a great question. Any other questions or comments from members of the board?
I just wanted to add that the benefit or the value that it adds to not only North Liberty, but to the entire, area around us, Coralville, Iowa City, Tiffin, Swisher. I mean, people come from all over those places to come to this place, and I think that's really where I feel like that second one is met fully with that. I mean, because it's not only just for this city, but it's for others as well. So that's my feeling on it.
I did have a question about the landscaping area, the 25-foot wide landscape area. So that and I'm seeing that it says tree planting is encouraged within that area. So for example, if North Liberty were to grow a little more around this property, then that is something then that would still have to be considered in respects to that, just to
Yes. So so right now the limits of the conditional use are just on that blue box.
mm-hmm.
And so if they annexed, say, further and we want to bring in the other part of the farm into and expand the agricultural experience to that, they'd have to come in and get a separate approval. But yes, then those standards would apply to that new part as well.
Okay, so it sounds like those standards are being met in the code.
Yeah, and the reason we put tree planting was there are existing, they have a tree line essentially there, but sometimes in codes you do like, okay, there's got to be one tree for every 30 feet or 50 feet, and it makes sense on a half-acre commercial site that's small, but it starts to get a little problematic if you start doing that, and you've got what do we have here, 63 acres,
Right.
And so we encouraged, it's got to be at least a minimum of a wide open, landscape area, and certainly we encourage that trees be maintained and planted there if.
Any other questions or comments? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I'll motion to approve.
And so for your motion here tonight, folks, if I could interject. Here we are. So Mr. Russing just had the findings up, which I believe are available in your packet.
Yep.
So a motion for this would include the board needs to have findings. You talked about them just now, right? And conditions. So this would be a sample motion that's put on the screen in front of you here, if you can read it.
I can't.
that might be and if you can't read it, well, I'm not going to tell you to
Maybe somebody else
move
can
one.
read it.
I'm not going to suggest that you make a motion you can't read.
Oh, thank you. Thanks.
But that would be I understand that is staff's recommended motion that would include findings and conditions. If you have your own conditions that you think are appropriate, or these conditions are not appropriate, or whatever you found, you'll want to talk about that before you do anything, and then take action as you think is appropriate. So, a motion. There's one.
Yeah, so I move that the Board of Adjustment accept the 2 listed findings and approve the request subject to the 2 conditions listed by the city staff.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Now you would typically have final discussion or questions amongst yourselves.
Okay. Any final discussion before we vote?
And we'll do this one as a roll call.
Yep. Could you do a roll call, please, Ryan?
Let me get back here. Sorry about that. I'm getting to my list because
These are randomized so that you don't always have the same person in the same order every time.
Brown,
Aye.
Gulick. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Julik. It's like it's
Julik.
a J instead
Okay.
of a G.
Julick,
Yep. Aye.
Rudham,
Aye.
and Heffley.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next on the agenda is the approval of the previous minutes. I motion to approve the previous minutes.
I second.
Any
All in favor?
all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Motion passes. Ryan, is there any old business?
There's not.
Is there any new business?
I think if there were new business, it'd probably be old because been a while since. No new business as well.
Need a motion to adjourn?
I would recommend you
Okay.
make a move to adjourn. Yeah.
Move to adjourn.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? We are adjourned.
Hope you get your gavel.